to be nectar or poison. Nectar or poison? Who here is interested in nectar? Everyone likes some nectar. Like some nice mango nectar? Right? I don't like getting my mango nectar at Costco because I get this nice organic mango nectar. Everything's good, but then they just throw a little bit of poison in there to preserve it. Just a little bit of poison. So actually, the Bhagavad Gita talks about nectar and poison. And what's nectar and what's poison? Ayush, you made it. I'm so happy you made it. So, so very good. You should have just brought Palash here. So Palash was staying with us for some time, and he invited Ayush. So we're very happy to have Ayush with us. So we're going to go to Bhagavad Gita. I knew what verse I wanted to do today, but I didn't remember exactly what number it was. So just bear with me. It's in the 18th chapter. This 18th chapter is wonderful because it talks about the modes of nature and how to do everything in the topmost way in life. So actually from the 14th chapter on in the Bhagavad Gita, it's a constant theme of what are the modes of nature. Modes of nature are what are the qualities of life's existence. There's a good quality called sattva. There's a really bad quality called tamas, or darkness. And there's symptoms of life that meet with all these. And then there's a middle quality called rajas, or activity, or passion, creation. So they represent the three qualities of life: creation, maintenance, sustenance, and destruction. And everything is going through these cycles. Right now we're in the destruction cycle of at least the climate. Everything is just so cold and bitter, and all the trees and their beautiful leaves and all the plants and vegetation, it's like a destroy time for all of them. So, what we're going to talk about is happiness in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance today. So this whole, from the 14th chapter on in Bhagavad Gita, if you haven't read the Bhagavad Gita, I would recommend. There's a lot of, any sciencey people here? If sciencey people, they can appreciate that so many great minds, like Albert Einstein, for instance, was so deeply impacted by the Bhagavad Gita. And there's many others as well. Hello.
Hello.
What is your name?
My name is Lynn.
Lynn?
Yes.
Are you friends with Parth?
Yes.
Wow, you have great friends. So welcome.
Okay.
We're so happy to have you. All right. So, just give me, here we go. Text 38 of the 18th chapter, we're going to read. So, 640 in the book. And someone get Lynn one of these books. This is very nice. Are you colleagues with Parth?
Yes.
Oh, that's very nice. You have great company every day. So, it's probably good you didn't just see Parth jumping up and down like a madman. That's not good professional atmosphere. But if you didn't see it, it didn't exist. So, so we're on text 38, 18th chapter. All right. Repeat after me. Remember Bhagavad Gita, if you don't know the meaning, Bhagavan means God, Gita means song. It's a song of God. It's written in the original, it's part of the longest poem in existence. Does anyone know? Quiz, trivia? What's the longest poem known to man? The Mahabharata, yes. So it's the concluding philosophical aspect of the longest poem in existence. And it's 700 verses. It's comprised in this book, but it's part of a greater, longer poem. And the whole thing is written in Sanskrit. Does anyone know? It'll be very easy to know the answer. What is the oldest language? Yes, it's Sanskrit. Yeah. Why would I ask that question if I wasn't just talking about Sanskrit? It's actually Sanskrit. It's written in the oldest language. But this is a little bit less known. That if artificial intelligence could use one universal language, do you know what it would be the most effective universal language? What do you think? It's Sanskrit, actually. Sanskrit it's amazing. It's the oldest language from which all other languages in modernity derive from. But it's also the most mathematically perfect, and it's amazing how you can interchange the words and get so many varieties of meanings, and also keep the meanings as well in interchanging. It's like an incredible language, and the whole thing is musical. So we're going to do a little bit of the musical, imagine life was a musical. Like we just kind of like, the English language is known to my mind. There are musicals out there. You ever go to a musical? What's that one that everyone is really popular right now? That's one of them, but that's not as popular as the Wizard of Oz one. Wicked, yeah, everyone's like all into this wicked thing. I don't know why everyone's all into being wicked, but it's a sinful world, I suppose. But anyhow, life could be a musical, and actually for the ancients, life was a musical. So this is a musical expression of also deep philosophical wisdom. So we'll try it out. The book teaches you how to sound it out. So what page?
640.
640. Vishayendriya samyoga. Repeat.
Vishayendriya samyoga.
Yattadagre mritopamam. Pariname vishamiva. Tatsukam rajasam smritam. Very nice. I should also mention, let's do an invocation prayer. It's a little bit brutish of me to not to say, let's get into the Bhagavad Gita and treat it like an ordinary book. We're actually, just like we set the intention, we were calling out the Lord to be an instrument in His service, and we observed a nice worship ceremony, and we sang very nicely for the Lord. But also, if we want to receive the mercy of the Lord's wisdom, which is what the Bhagavad Gita is going to be, it's a very, very complex, deep philosophical wisdom. If we want to receive that mercy, again, we should set the intention of trying to humbly request it. So we'll glorify the Lord via this. It's easy to remember, but just try and repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And that means I offer my respects and my obeisances unto the all-pervading Lord. Vasudev is a name for the Lord that means He who pervades everything, the one that pervades everything. So in the Christian theology, it's akin to the Holy Spirit, the Spirit that's everywhere, the living force that's within all things. So also Vasudev is indicating Vasudev, who was the father of the avatar known as Krishna. This is the teaching of Krishna. So just to understand Bhagavad Gita, it means the song of God. Krishna was not an ordinary person. Krishna did historically fact that he did wonderful, incredible things that made him incredibly prominent across the Indian subcontinent. That's what our modern, you could say, what is it? One who studies history. What is that called? Historian, right? That's it. It's easy, right? Historian. Modern historians would agree there. But what this teaching is, it describes who Krishna is, and Krishna describes who he is, but he also describes the fundamental issues of life. What is the meaning of life? What is our position in this world? What is the position of God? What is karma? What is the reactions to our actions that we keep getting in this world? What is time? How is time acting on us? And ultimately, what is this material cosmos around us? What are we a part of? All these questions are answered in Bhagavad Gita. It's deeply philosophical. Like I mentioned, Albert Einstein, he was deeply impacted by the Bhagavad Gita. Ralph Waldo Emerson, who is one of the most prominent American or Western literary personalities. He was deeply impacted. Henry David Thoreau as well. Also, other people who aren't so well received in history really had a deep interest in the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita. This was very popular in the upper echelons of the Nazi regime, and so on. Many people wanted to harness the power and the wisdom that's contained in the Bhagavad Gita. But actually, it's spoken in the Bhagavad Gita how to actually attain that. How to really melt the heart of God is only one thing that can conquer God. Does anyone know? It's the highest science given in Bhagavad Gita. It's love, yes. You can't actually conquer the most powerful personality with anything other than love. That's the only facility that anyone has. And how to do that is explained. It's a science. It's the process of yoga. And there's different paths of yoga. Does anyone know what yoga means? It doesn't just necessarily mean this.
Union with God.
It means union, but then the highest yoga, is what Shivadas is saying, is with God. So it means to unite or to link, to make a connection. And so the highest path of yoga mentioned is bhakti, is to make that connection through love, through devotion. And ultimately, what is that object of yoga? It's the supreme truth. We're all looking for the truth. Jesus says, what will set you free? The truth. The truth will set you free. And then he explains through the path of love. But that's the truth will set us free. And the ultimate truth is understanding God. Actually, the father of modern physics. Who knows the name of the personality who's the father of modern physics? What's that?
Aristotle?
No.
Plato.
No, he's like within the past 100 years.
Physics, you ask?
Yeah, modern physics.
Einstein.
What's that?
Einstein.
No, there's one other personality.
Schopenhauer?
What's that? I don't know. It might be a quick Google away. Father of modern physics. Let's see if it's the... Oh no, they are saying it's Einstein. There's another one who... it's not physics. I think it's neuroscience. That's what it is. But anyhow, he's a famous personality in the scientific world. But he actually, I wish I should know his name. That would be better. That would be more scientific of me. But luckily, I'm not I don't have to meet all the peer reviews and all of the credentials. Even though it would be good. So what he said though is that the first gulp of the natural sciences will make one an atheist. But the more that you get deeper and deeper down into the glass, you find God waiting for you at the end. And actually, this is true in my life as well. I was always a seeker. I was always wanting to know the truth. And the reason I left my religious practices, my spiritual practices earlier in my life, was I felt they didn't line up with, values of truth that I inherited from modern academia, through schooling and science, and so on. And it wasn't only until I had a really pivotal experience where I perceived, and actually it's personal, but an out-of-body experience that I had. And it wasn't only until then that I was confronted with the reality that, oh, wait, my senses and my way of observing reality wasn't the ultimate summum bonum of truth. Actually, modern scientists, they'll tell you, the human senses, the human eyes, the ears, all the faculties from which we measure all of existence, what percentage of that which they can observe with their technology of an infinite universe, but what percentage can the human senses gather? What information can it gather? What percentage in comparison to their technology? Does anyone know? The closest whole number.
Zero.
What's that?
Zero.
It's zero. It's practically zero. It's approaching zero. Their technology is so refined, like with their telescopes and their abilities to hear and so on. It's so refined that the human senses, just the faculties that it has, can measure about 0%. Now, I'll do, this one's a math question. It's not as scientific. Now let's put a number to that, whatever modern science can observe with their faculties. So let's say the number is 100. If the universe is infinite, which modern science is also agreeing, anyone, where's my scientist back here? Where's Parth? Lynn, you'll have to do. What, you've heard that the universe, oh look, all of our personalities are here. Wonderful. So nice. We're talking about science right now, and our scientists literally walk in the door. What a perfect arrangement. So we have special guests. So welcome. Please tell us your names.
This is Mortaza.
Mortazar?
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, you pronounce it very well.
My name is Shiri.
Shiri?
Yeah.
Mortazar, Shiri, and Lynn.
Yes.
And Parth. You all work with Parth?
Yeah.
It's your good fortune and maybe not so good fortune. You tell me, I don't know. I would say good fortune. I'm very honored to have Parth here with us. So you're our special guest, so thank you so much for joining. So we're actually talking about science, the science of how to actually acquire information. You know, so we the way that we gather science is using our senses, right? Our eyes, our ears, our nose. This is like second grade science. Right? You guys are doing like 15th, 20th grade science. You guys are doing very advanced science. But sometimes it's good to get a reference back to the beginnings of science. So we were saying already before, it's proven by modern science that the human senses can actually only measure, the closest whole number would be 0% based on the technologies that the scientists currently have. Like for instance, the human eye could see, the closest whole number would be 0% in comparison with the finest telescopes can see and so on. And the same is through sound monitoring and so on. Even all these companies, they have all these scientific ways to manipulate taste. They can, you know, all like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they have like these artificial tongues in like labs that know how to taste, and they know what they can put in the food items that'll make you most addicted to their foods and so on like that. There's so many things out there that science is used for, good and bad. I would say that's a bad use of science. But what can be done? But what you see is that the human faculty can measure 0% of what the modern technologies can measure. And why am I saying this? Why are you even talking about this? And the reason is we are so much trusting what the human senses can perceive. What actually, though, what science would prove is that the human senses can perceive 0% of reality. That's actually what our modern science leads us to the conclusion. What's that Western axiom? The more I know, the more I realize, the less I know. You know, I think, who is it? It might have been Aristotle or Socrates. And he said something along the lines that the more I know, the more I realize I know nothing, and I'm not even sure I know that. You know, so it's kind of a philosopher. So we really don't know very much. You know, we know like 0% of reality is what our modern science would say the human senses can actually perceive. So, you know, why to even approach, you know, spiritual science or spiritual philosophy? It's because ultimately we don't really have we have a pretty bad bargain here. We've got a machine, we can call our body a machine, that can take in 0% of reality. And with this machine, we've created all kinds of technologies that are studying the known universe. This is called Prakriti. And the study of Prakriti, they come to the conclusion that it's infinite. They can't reach the end of what they're perceiving. And so this is, again, the math. Let's quantify whatever the human senses could, you know, let's say the number is 100. What is any number over infinity? Which is what the modern scientists are now proving, or at least theorizing what this universe is. What's the answer? What's that? It's practically zero. It's approaching zero. It has some minuscule like value, but over infinity, anything is zero. Even billions over infinity is zero. And trillions over infinity is zero. So like this, why potentially evaluate? But then, Palama, Hare Krishna. So the reason to even evaluate, to try and get a higher source of knowledge from, say, like a divine or a mystic tradition, would actually, it's quite scientific to say, you know what, I should look at something else if my measures of faculty, and even the finest scientists around me, our measures of faculty of being able to evaluate anything of this world is still 0% of the information. Right? Does that make is that proper logic? I see a couple of nods back there. Right? That's proper logic. So, actually, that's not a very good scenario here. Shivani, Hare Krishna, so nice to see you. So the hope is here that approaching, let's say, a divine or a mystic tradition is that we're going to get some information that's better than the 0%, or practically approaching 0% information that we have currently with the current range of human study. That's our best bet. Is like, well, I just proved to myself that I don't know anything. So I hope someone knows something somewhere. That's really our best bet. It's like, okay, my faculties for studying this universe and reality around me are at practically 0%. So hopefully somebody knows something somewhere. That's our hope against hope. And so luckily we have wisdom from the Vedas. And we take the Vedas as an authority. Now you can test the Vedas. I'm not saying just be a blind, well, yeah, these guys said they know everything. That's fine, no problem. No, but you can actually test. That's the scientific method is, there's observation. You make a hypothesis. My hypothesis is, hey, this is some really top level knowledge here, and it's beyond the realm of the human senses. And then you do an experiment. And I decided personally, I'll experiment with this in my life. I'll experiment some of these teachings. Let me take to the paths of meditation and yoga. And one of these experiments is what this verse is going to touch on, is the scientific analysis of the universe is taken into three qualities of nature, and it represents the faculties of creation, sustenance, and destruction. What elements cause creation? What elements sustain, illuminate? And what elements destroy in this world? And you can study this, and actually all in the Bhagavad Gita, this is a large section at the end, the 14th chapter to the 18th chapter. This is a huge study. So we'll do one verse out of 700, out of 48,000 of the total poem, which is the Mahabharata. It's the longest poem. It's very nice, and we'll see. So again, we did this in the beginning. Vishayendriya samyoga yataragre mritopamam pariname vishamiva tatsukam rajasam smritam. Vishaya, objects of sense. Indriya, senses. Samyoga, combination. Yat, that. Tat, which. Agre, in the beginning. Amrita upamam, just like nectar. Pariname, at the end. Vishamiva, like poison. Tat, that. Sukam, happiness. Rajasam, in the mode of passion. Smritam, is considered. Okay, remember there's these three gunas, or these three qualities, and they're mentioned as goodness, sattva, which is like pure. This is the energy of that which sustains all of life. Then there's rajas, which is passion, the impetus to create. We are always, in order to do anything in this world, you have to have this impetus to create. And then the final one is tamas, or that which destroys. And there's so many things. this is happening. So this is describing two of them: happiness in the mode of goodness, and happiness in the mode of passion. And then we'll go to the next verse and we'll talk about the happiness in the mode of ignorance as well. So, translation. That happiness, mine is going to be a little bit different than yours. This one was kind of edited for more modern approach, but I like the original. So I read that. So, translation. That happiness which is derived from contact of the senses with their sense objects, and which appears like nectar at first, but poison at the end, is said to be of the nature of passion. And then the purport. This is a very short purport, but it's a very... this is going to be relevant to everyone, because this is how most people in the material world chase happiness. Purport. A young man and a young woman meet, and the senses drive the young man to see her, to touch her, and to have sexual intercourse. In the beginning, this may be very pleasing to the senses, but at the end, or after some time, it becomes just like poison. They are separated, or there's divorce, there's lamentation, there's sorrow, etc. Such happiness is always in the mode of passion. Happiness derived from a combination of the senses and the sense objects is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. Whoa, that's pretty heavy, but I'll explain. Now you should know before that, it says that which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. We can actually see this in our life. We have a lot of students here. We have some teachers here, professional people. In order to get in your professional positions, there's a bitter period that you have to do, called being a student, studying, training, whatever your job is. It's not so enjoyable. Like when I was in college, I ended up dropping out of college. I had decent reason, because I went to college for business, and I kind of realized the business that was being pulled over on me, and I said, wait a second. You guys have taught me too much to stay in this. This interest on these loans, this is crazy. But anyhow, so I left college for that reason. But what I saw was that some students, they would stay in. Everyone else would go out and party, and they would have, the pleasures of the senses, would come out, let's drink, let's get intoxicated, young boys, young girls, and now it's young boys, young girls, doesn't matter. Everyone's, pleasures of the bodily senses, and they would go out and they would prioritize these things. But they wouldn't do as well in their studies as, say, someone who would stay in and really train and work harder. And in the beginning, it seems like, oh, those are the squares. In my college, it was just like, oh, there's, I don't want to call names, but there's the nerds, like, oh, they just stay in and study all the time. And then these are the cool crew, they're the popular ones. They do this, they do that, all the other things. But actually, if you see where everyone ends up, usually the nerds, they end up like in the top levels of society, and they have a much higher standard of happiness than the cool crew. And whether it was high school, college, doesn't matter. Why? Due to this very principle. This very principle is the nerds understood, or maybe that was their nature, that, okay, taking some hardship, some discipline towards a goal will give me a higher standard of happiness than immediately trying to seize pleasure and then worrying about the consequences later. Right? You've all experienced this before. When you study for a test, why study? You could just have fun, or you could watch your favorite Netflix series, or things like that. Or why go to the lab every day and, do research and things like this? There's a much more fun thing available at home or somewhere like that. So we're always trying to, do this. But actually, what happens is there's consequences to our actions. And so when we choose the mode of passion, trying to engage the body with its senses, we think that will give happiness. So the example here was sexual happiness. many people, this is like the prime driving. Actually, modern science is proving this is the main impetus behind every species. Why it does what it does is to procreate, to continue the sexual impetus. This is what will continue the creation and the destruction in the material world. But when we try and seek our happiness in such a way, it actually causes distress. And we don't even realize. I have a wife. I have a child coming on the way. My wife is preparing all kinds of things. But you actually, and you practically see in our society, and actually there's a phenomena that we see here. There's, especially we have a lot of Indian students here. There's a phenomena that we see they have in their marriage system where they're very attracted to the Western paradigm of love marriage. But they traditionally have a marriage system where it's arranged for them, and then they commit to each other, and then there's not too much option unless some really grievous offense was made of separating. You're like, okay, we're coming together as a duty. But actually, interestingly enough, the love marriage is the popular. This is how we've always done things. This is how I met my wife. I think I got lucky, but what ends up usually happening, you see the Western paradigm of marriage, more marriages end in divorce than they do in love, or in the longer sustenance of the marriage. Why? Because when we come together, it's usually due to the pleasure of the senses. But what attracts us in the beginning, like me and my wife are still pretty young. My wife is very beautiful. Even with the baby, she looks very beautiful. No problem. Yeah, especially with the baby. Thank you, Deidre. Yeah, especially with the baby, she looks very beautiful. But if I'm just going to worry if her bodily beauty is going to be the prime force of my happiness in my marriage, guess what? Eventually, I'll be disappointed, because the body cannot stay beautiful forever. It's impossible. And if my bodily beauty, and she's lucky that I didn't come with much in the first place, so it'll be easier for her. But my bodily beauty, if that's the force of her happiness, she will also be very disappointed. As we get older, the beauty, it gets destroyed. That's just the nature of it. Very few people look at an 85-year-old woman and be like, that's hot. No, it's the young. That's what it is. No one's really looking at 85-year-old women. There are people with all kinds of interesting fetishes in this world, but that's not most people. So this is, we have to understand, we can evaluate our life. We can actually look, how do I seek happiness? How do I seek pleasure? And if we actually evaluate how we seek pleasure and do like a scientific analysis of how we seek pleasure in the world, we'd actually realize we're probably doing this one. It seems like nectar at first. It'll immediately feel good and taste good but actually what does it do is it causes us distress eventually. Why? Because then we feel longing for that again. So we do this all the time. We work so hard for something, and it's probably a small, trivial goal. People have so many habits, very, very bad habits as well. But that actually will go, let me read the next verse, so just so you know the whole spectrum. Happiness in the mode of goodness, happiness in the mode of passion, and happiness in the mode of ignorance. It says, that happiness which is derived, we did that one. And that happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, and which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be of the nature of ignorance. An example of that would be like intoxication. Say you're getting happiness through intoxication. Really what's happening from an objective standpoint is, what does intoxication mean? Yeah, you're poisoning yourself. That's what intoxication is. So you're actually destroying your body's faculties and getting pleasure in it. This is the example of this. And of course, in that which is blind to self-realization, meaning realizing the deeper truth of who you are and the universe around you. Nobody, when you take a test and you have to have certain levels of clarity and realization in your life to do something, nobody gets drunk before the test. And if you get drunk before the test, you're probably not the best student. Because that's just not a good idea. That's unanimously known, right? You wouldn't get drunk before a test. So obviously, but actually, the seeking happiness in this thing, it can never actually give you happiness, and it's the obvious conclusion of that is the hangover. I was joking a few weeks back, but one of the reasons my wife gave up drinking is she had such a bad. I used to drink. I used to all kinds of drugs, all kinds of things. I'm not just like some like goody two shoes angel who just like appeared in this world. I did so many bad things, and I learned, I learned very viscerally what actually was causing me all kinds of misery and distress. And actually, it was this teaching the Bhagavad Gita had to offer that made me realize, oh, this is offering a better standard of happiness. Let me go for it. And so anyhow, one of the things, what happened to my wife was like a 5-year-long vegetarian, but she had gotten so intoxicated one day that her mental faculties weren't as good as they probably could have and should have been, and she decided to have not only meat again, but she had meat from a gas station, which is probably the worst place to get meat again after a 5-year vegetarian binge. And naturally, because she was intoxicated, she vomited that everywhere. And that was like the last straw for her. She's like, I'm never drinking again after this. And actually, we met only a few weeks later, and that was about it. We both have been sworn off drinking since. So these are the levels of happiness. It's a very sad phenomena, but we see them a lot downtown when we go out and try and solicit or proselytize, you could say, try and share this information with others. There's a whole culture of folks downtown who are addicted to drugs, and they're on the streets, but they get great happiness from doing crack cocaine or heroin or whatever the thing is to do. But we see from our objective standpoint, no, this is horrible. This is a horrible way to get happiness. We see it. Just like we might see a pig. A pig likes to eat poop. Yummy poop. Nom, 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 nom. But we see that's a terrible way to get happiness. The pig can do like that, but we have like a little bit of a higher vantage point. So similarly, what we might not be able to see is what was described in this verse. If we're basing our happiness on, the pleasures between, romantic partners, that's actually very limited. It actually, it will be, eventually, it can't be sustained. And fights will happen and all kinds of things like this. And it leads to misery. I'll admit this, I hope no one online is watching that shouldn't be watching. Like relative, I don't want relatives to know this, but I can be honest and upfront with you. I've had sexual addiction in my life. It's a very, very, probably one of the most prominent things. Actually, many young men are struggling with this immensely, with this pornography. The most popular websites on the internet are pornography websites. And people are struggling with this immensely. And they're, thinking this will give them happiness. Nobody goes onto that website looking for sadness. There's a form of happiness that they're getting from going on these websites. But ultimately, that type of happiness that's a good example, because when the session of visiting that website is finished, most people feel shame, and they're not feeling like great about themselves after that. They're like, at least from my personal experience in the past, that was, you don't feel good after you do something like that. But similarly, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, I can go out and sleep around, this one, that one, the other one. But actually, even so, even if you're successful, and a lot of times you're not successful in your search, but even if you are somehow successful, usually what happens is, one or the other isn't interested or something like that, and it can't be sustained. Anyone been married here a long time in the room? Karen. So I don't want to get too personal, But I bet you, and I'm seeing this, I've been married now, oh man, it's 2025. It'll be 5 years next month. So I'll be married now 5 years. And I can tell you that the romantic feelings and they're not the same as when we first started the marriage. They've slowed down and diminished, and we've had to mature and chill out in many ways, in most ways. Because ultimately that can't be sustained. We've both come to the realization that actually can't give us happiness. Keep trying and trying that way for happiness. But we have, we do have a baby coming. The baby didn't come by magic. It wasn't like an immaculate conception, But even so, we tried to do it in a way that was sanctioned, saw it as a service. Not that we're trying to just enjoy this act, but not just for our own enjoyment, that we're here to do a service, to bring a soul into the world, and actually to teach that soul how to serve others in this world and be a force for good or change in this world. By having access to knowledge that's it's on a higher platform. You could see it, I'm just presenting a hypothesis to you. The hypothesis is that there's a higher source of knowledge, and it's divine. All ordinary courses of knowledge can never give you satisfaction in this world. So all the lab stuff you're doing, Parth, every day, that can never actually fully satisfy you. We were giving the example at the beginning of class of like a fish needing water for happiness. So similarly, we think, our modern scientists in many ways, they've somehow come to a conclusion, even though they do admit that they have 0% of the ability to fully make conclusions in this world. But that we are matter. And actually there is no science stating that what we are is actually matter. Yes, you can evaluate that the body is indeed matter. You can evaluate even that the brain and its tissues are matter. But the study of consciousness, they cannot come to a finite conclusion on we are matter. All the great spiritual traditions say that we are indeed not matter. That is definitely not what we are.
I think science showed that as well. It's everything's energy, pretty much. Vibration.
Yeah, then now I think in metaphysics, they have many of these conclusions, I think with string theory and all these other things, but that's way over my head. That's not my credentials. Parth and the gang in the back can study these things. That's above my pay grade. But yeah, there is a lot. They also diagnose that there's a weight to the, so you could say the soul or what's animating the body. There's a very microgram change when the body dies. There's some scientists out of the University of Virginia who studies the phenomena of children having memories of previous existences, and they've actually he tried to corroborate with what the children said with real life events and what they've described, and he made astounding conclusions, pretty much proving that there is the phenomena of children able to retain memories from a previous existence. These things are mentioned as common knowledge in the Vedic understanding, but even in the Bible, this was described as John the Baptist was a returning incarnation of Elijah from a previous time. So these things are well, and science will prove them. That's absolutely.
There's a guy, Marius Stefano, I think it's pronounced, and he's like on Gaia, if anybody's familiar with Gaia, yeah. And he remembers all his past lives, so he's got a lot of, not quite documentary, but kind of like that, where he's talking all the time and he explains everything and the meaning of everything and why things happen. It's fantastic. So. Wow,
I've never heard of him. That's something would be to check out, but I'm hoping he is a beacon of truth.
Oh yeah, he definitely.
Yes, so that's very nice. I'll take your word for it for now. but I'll have to do my own scientific analysis to fully confirm.
He's going all over the place and he travels all over the world. So there's a lot of things he's doing and constantly doing. He's just teaching people. So he's definitely somebody you'd want to check out.
That's very interesting. Marius? What do you-
Marius Di Stefano.
Marius Di Stefano.
Oh, yeah.
I can't pronounce it right.
Yeah.
Really good.
Very interesting. So, well, that's very good. I can't remember any of my past lives. So, but no problem. So, okay. That's pretty much my presentation. We had, I know Parth said he was going to invite some of his friends from the scientific background. So I said, oh, you know what science do I know about? And, so this is, because I was never a scientist. I was more business minded. And when I went to school, I had a lot of business type of, you could say, ambitions. But I always felt that practicality was very important. And so when I was practically, observing, well, what should I actually do with my life? Especially I had this very visceral experience where I perceived my own type of mystical experience where I felt that I had left my body. And this was drug-induced and things like that. But very much so felt that that I had left my body. I had to come back to the conclusion, and well, if I can leave the body, then what really am I? And so that began my whole study and search. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend anybody to take drugs and also try and replicate that experience. But with actual proper, what's called Sankhya. Sankhya means analysis of that which is matter and that which is spirit. If you did proper Sankhya or proper analysis of what this world is, you could also reach the same conclusion. And like, well, what really am I? Because the answer you'll find and what Bhagavad Gita will present is that you're a spirit soul. And that this body, this vehicle, is just that, it's a vehicle. And just like you got out of your car to get here, or you got out of a car of someone else to get here, or maybe you walked here, I don't know what you did, but you wouldn't identify with the car. Ultimately, this body is not who we really are. And if we can have previous existences, which modern science is even proving, then what are we? What is really the meaning of life? These things will completely change. Just like if you were typing in a GPS and you had a goal of what you wanted to go, but if you don't know the starting point, the whole thing doesn't really matter much. But if you actually know where you start, which is what the process of self-realization is, if you actually know who and what you are, then you'll actually know what are the appropriate actions and steps to take in life. What could really satisfy you? Like if you're a fish and you're trying to find happiness out of water, not knowing that I'm a fish, I should be in the water to find happiness. That's like us. We're a spirit, but we're seeking matter for happiness. Even though it's proven, we could scientifically analyze it. We can never be happy through matter. What is the main reason why we can never be happy through matter?
Spiritual beings.
Well, yes, but what's the more negative side of?
You're kind of
Maya?
disconnected from God, kind of.
Well, yes, but even yes.
Because all matter is constantly breaking down, it will never last?
Yes, it's temporary. Matter is temporary. If you want a position of fixed happiness, you would have to be in that fixed position to always be able to experience happiness. Now, unfortunately, with our current information of who we are as a body, that's never the case. We know all bodies will die. Anyone here not think they will die? Actually, it's funny. It's said in the Mahabharata in another place that the most amazing thing about existence is that we see death all around us, everywhere, and yet we never think it's going to happen to us. We think, oh man, they died, he died, but we're never really like considering like, oh, that's going to come for me. We don't live thinking we're going to die. But if we actually understood very viscerally, very real, that we are going to die and that there might be something that we should do. It's like a test. What is the thing I have to realize at that junction? We might live very differently. I'm sure we would live differently.
Not dying is also a curse.
What's that?
Not dying is also a curse. That's what
I couldn't hear.
He said not dying is also a curse.
that's what Parma and Man was saying.
Yes, yes,
So
and
if you're a vampire and you're stuck in the same body for
Yes.
eternity,
yes. I would not want to be in this body for eternity. There's so many better standards of happiness that could be had than with this body. This body is pretty gross, you know. No, really. You ask my wife, you know, it passes foul air, it passes all kinds of things that it doesn't need. As I'm getting older, hair is arising in places that never arose before. You know, the wax situation in the ears gets worse. Everything is just getting worse, you know, in this body. I'm really not wanting to stay in this body for eternity, but I will do whatever, 60 more years or maybe less. No problem. But yeah, these things are temporary. They can never give happiness. But actually, from this vision that there may be higher knowledge, it actually gives a much more hopeful presentation. And the presentation is that you're eternal. And that there's an eternal situation of happiness. And you can experience that eternal situation of happiness right now if you adjust your consciousness. And that's what we do. That's the foundation behind our practices, is that we try and realize what's called sambandha jnana. Sambandha means relationship, and jnana means knowledge of that relationship. With what? The Supreme. Knowledge of the divinity and the connection to that divinity. We didn't get here as an accident. Now, for you to faithfully understand that and live by it and realize that that will take plenty of time, and it may not even be in this lifetime. That might not be a part of anyone's program in this lifetime. But just if a leaf doesn't want to acknowledge that it's connected to the roots, doesn't mean it's not connected to the roots. And if that leaf does want to disconnect from the roots, or does get disconnected from the roots, it doesn't have much value after that. It will shrivel up and it will die. But indeed, it was connected by the roots. It was brought about by the roots and the nourishing process and the sunlight and so on. But the roots are where all of the emanations of the plant came from. But us, we're also compared to like emanations from something divine, someone divine. And if we turn and we put our time and our energy into establishing that relationship and then acting appropriately, which is actually through the process of worship or love, actually we can be happy. And that I've practically experienced in my life, to the extent that I actually practice devotional practices in my life. I'm very satisfied. But the conditioning towards seeking happiness from that which appears like nectar at first, you know, the sweet temptations of matter, but ultimately does feel like poison in the end because I lose it, or I have to make all kinds of elaborate arrangements or work like a dog to go get it again, recreate it again. We see this in life, you know. Oh man, I don't know. Like I used to go out like clubbing, and if maybe if I got really lucky, you know, I would get what I wanted out of the clubbing experience, you know, lady or this or that and the other. And then, but you know, eventually the night ends and the intoxication ends and so on. And then I had, you know, whatever thing, you know, I thought I had in the intoxicated stupor that I was in. You know, I realized it wasn't what it was. And then I had to go out and try and find again and again and again. And me thinking that would be happiness, in the moment I was, yes, this will be happiness. But it didn't cause happiness. It just caused me more and more distress of me trying to recreate another experience. So this is actually, this is practical for everyone. Everyone can see. There's many things that you might do in life that you think will give you happiness, but ultimately are just causing you different forms of distress, trying to recreate or chase the happiness again and again. So anyhow, just some food for thought. Any questions or comments, or from any side here? You're all enlightened? Okay. All right. So that's it. No one has anything. So, okay. What we're going to do now is we are going to do a meditation. Again, the presentation is that we are connected to something divine, to someone divine. We claim to have a very intimate connection with the Lord, and that He gives us knowledge on how to deepen and establish that connection. So we chant His name. That's like the main activity that we do. We call upon the name of God, and it actually, factually speaking, many people who practice this, they feel feelings of ecstasy and bliss if they actually take up to it. So that's my theory. You can try it out yourselves, see how you feel. I know in the beginning we did that, right? And it got, the boys were jumping. People were so happy. So I think that is what, I think we're going to have Michael. Is Michael available?
Michael, are you available? He can be.
Okay, Michael will be available. And I'm going to do a little offering, and just to bless the food that we're all going to enjoy, and then we're all going to eat together. Does that sound cool? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Travis. It's so nice to see you. So thanks to